This former Saints safety just called out the Saints front office and sent them a public, direct message after he was not re-signed earlier this offseason. And what he said aligns with what Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry both had to say about the Saints front office and how the organization is run. Earlier this offseason, prior to free agency, when everyone was talking about who the Saints should and should not re-sign, one of the more bigger questions when it came to the Saints free agency and who they were going to keep was safety Lonnie Johnson. Now, the Saints didn't have to make too many tough decisions this offseason when it came to who to re-sign and who not to re-sign, because the top names of that list included Lonnie Johnson and Jimmy Graham and Jameis Winston and Isaac Yiadom. Like, they weren't really losing an Alvin Kamara, or they weren't losing a Christian McCaffrey. No elite high profile names, but some good, decent players were hitting the free agent market. And Lonnie Johnson wasn't like the best safety or a starting player, but I think for the Saints, he was a good special teams player and a good depth player, and he came in when he needed to and made some plays. He got a pick in the preseason. He had some nice plays in the regular season when he came in for injuries and such. I thought it would be smart for the Saints to bring him back, and I thought it would happen. I've talked to him. We follow each other on Instagram. I seemed pretty certain that he was going to stay with the Saints, and you can even look at his Twitter activity during the season, and he said that he wanted to stay. Someone tagged him in a tweet saying, if I was the Saints, I would keep Lonnie Johnson for another 3 to 4 years. And he said that he didn't plan on leaving as long as the Saints wanted him there. So it seemed like Lonnie Johnson had a plan of staying with the Saints as long as there was mutual interest. But after some time of negotiations with the Saints, Lonnie Johnson ended up signing with the Houston Texans, which is where he actually started his NFL career. And before the news was even announced that he was signing with the Houston Texans, he tweeted out, "Nola, gonna have love for you forever. I tried, I promise, I tried. We just couldn't get it done." So it seemed like he really wanted to stay with the Saints, but the Saints front office didn't want to keep him around. And like I said, it wasn't like a big deal breaker, but he's a good special teams player, really good depth. And I think right about now, considering what the Saints safety room is right now, the Saints might be regretting not retaining him. And I can personally say Lonnie Johnson wanted to stay, but it was the Saints who did not want to keep him around. And when the news broke that the Saints made their first official free agent signing of Willie Gay from the Kansas City Chiefs, he left a comment under my post. Since he follows me, he saw it on his timeline. And here's what he had to say under the post: that Willie Gay had signed with the Saints on a 1-year deal worth $5 million at a max with a base of $3 million. He left a comment saying, "Damn, I didn't even want that, but at least Willie's a dog." Like, it seemed like his asking price really wasn't that much, and the Saints still didn't want to keep him. And given the safety market, from Jamal Adams getting released, Quandre Diggs, Kevin Byard, Justin Simmons, Marcus May, there was a lot more safeties that were released this offseason. The safety market definitely took a dip, but still, the asking price from Lonnie Johnson to be less than about $3 million doesn't seem like it would have been a huge issue for the New Orleans Saints to pay him that. But from the looks of it, it simply just seems like they did not want Lonnie Johnson on the team. And honestly, that may have been a mistake, because the safety spot right now for the Saints is the biggest weakness of the defense, in my opinion. During training camp in the offseason, they had camp battles for the opposite safety spot of Tyrann Mathieu, Jonathan Abram, Jordan Howden, Will Harris, Roderick Teamer. All of these guys were getting opportunities to take that spot opposite of Tyrann Mathieu, and yet no one was able to do so. And even Dennis Allen was asked about it during one of the press conferences, and he said he's been waiting for someone to take the bull by the horns at that spot, and yet no one has been able to do so. So the safety position right now for the Saints is really thin, and they really could use a guy like Lonnie Johnson right now. After the Saints let go of Lonnie Johnson, they did sign Will Harris to the safety room, but like I said, I don't think Will Harris is probably as good as depth as Lonnie Johnson would have been. When you look at the safety room, Lonnie Johnson's probably a better coverage safety than Will Harris and Jonathan Abram. Ideally, you'd have Jordan Howden starting, but if he wasn't ready, or if Dennis Allen didn't feel he was prepared, Lonnie Johnson could have been a good plug-and-play player. When it came to cut day, though, the Texans did end up releasing Lonnie Johnson, which to me was a little bit of a surprise. But when I first saw this, I was thinking, oh, the Saints could possibly bring him back, add talent to the safety room, get a guy who's familiar with the system, considering the safety spot is, really thin. But Lonnie Johnson shut that idea down immediately on Twitter. TJ Jones on Twitter said, "Wouldn't be surprised if the Saints brought back safety Lonnie Johnson." And he responded on Twitter by saying he would be surprised. And he went on to also say the Saints don't want him. They simply just don't want him. And that there was simply nothing that he could do about it. And let's not forget that the Saints probably felt a little bit concerned about the safety position, so they went out and pursued Justin Simmons, took him on his first visit, but he ended up signing with the Atlanta Falcons, the division rivals, for only $8 million. The Saints could have spent that, but they ended up not spending that much money on Simmons, and now their safety room is a bigger concern. After not signing Justin Simmons and after letting Lonnie Johnson go earlier this offseason, it's pretty clear that there's a pretty big concern at that safety spot opposite of Tyrann Mathieu. After Lonnie Johnson was released by the Texans, he ended up signing with a division rival of the Saints in the Carolina Panthers, and he made a public announcement to all of Who Dat Nation and a direct message to the Saints front office. This thing went viral on Twitter, over 1 million views here. He said, "Now Nola, you know that I got a lot of love for you, but now I got smoke for them people in that front office." Sending a direct message to Mickey Loomis, maybe Dennis Allen, Gail Benson. And I'll say this, I think a lot of Saints fans could agree that they got smoke for the Saints front office as well. By the way that they've been drafting and handling business over the last few seasons, it has not been pretty, so I have to agree with Lonnie Johnson here. We all got smoke with the Saints front office. And now this wasn't the first time a former Saints player this offseason sent a message to the team's front office and their organization. Former Saints wide receivers Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas both had some words for the Saints team and organization as well. And I'll say this, a lot of people gave Michael Thomas a ton of crap for what he was saying and what he was airing out. But you now have 3 players airing out business against the Saints front office and that they're a poorly run organization, but yet Michael Thomas is considered the bad guy. Like, it's pretty clear that there is something going on here if you have these former players having an issue with how the team was being run. People just hate Michael Thomas even though what he's saying is true. When it comes to Jarvis Landry, we did a whole video on it, but just out of nowhere he tweeted out that he came off a 500-yard season in 12 games. Took $3 million just to get shit on by the Saints. When he asked the Saints why he wasn't being valued, they told me he was doing exactly what they wanted from him. He said he had 25 catches and that they were losing games. Look at his targets per game. Never was about the check or the money with him, ever. So basically, Jarvis Landry's exposing that the Saints were okay with mediocrity, being average, and that their star players and high-profile players, they were okay with them underperforming. And then when it comes to Michael Thomas, there was a ton of things that he aired out against the Saints organization. And we're not going to go through each of them, but I will say this, he did air it out against the Saints medical staff, Dennis Allen in the front office, along with Derek Carr. When it came to Ryan Ramczyk not performing or progressing as well in rehab for his injury, Michael Thomas responded by saying it's like he uses the same line and just changes the player's name as if there isn't a team doctor and trainers on staff that have nothing to do with it. They're trying to protect them as much as possible, but hey, don't mind me, I don't work there anymore. But that's the real problem. And then he also put a little snippet of what Dennis Allen said about him and Marshawn Lattimore in 2022. Then he also said that the Saints medical staff has a little folder, but when players have different types of injuries when it comes to ankles, knees, wrist, or whatever, they use the exact same exercises and rehab despite what the injury is. So basically, they're not really rehabbing the injury, they're just like stretching. He called it insanity. He also aired some stuff out against Dennis Allen by saying that certain players are not viewed as well because they're not yes men, so they end up looking like cancers, but under a winning head coach like Sean Payton, they're looked at differently. They're looked at like winners. It's a mentality that makes losers uncomfortable because they're so used to losing all their careers. This is a direct shot at Dennis Allen and how he's been running things along with the Saints organization. Very similar to what Jarvis Landry and Lonnie Johnson said. And obviously Michael Thomas aired some more stuff out, but For this video, the tweets that we just went over really go hand in hand with what we're trying to say, which is the Saints organization is being poorly run, but people refuse to believe what Michael Thomas has been saying the whole time. Like I said, you got former players recently coming out this past offseason against the Saints organization and airing out the truth, but people will only blame and point fingers at Michael Thomas as if he's the cancer and he's the problem, but in reality, there's something going on in the Saints organization. Let me know what you make of Lonnie Johnson's comments. Subscribe to my channel Cash Sports for more daily NFL content. Have a good one. Peace.